Hi, this is Alicia Downs, RN, MSN, CDCES, Director of Patient Care and Education at Integrated Diabetes Services, bringing you another video on Control-IQ optimization. It's been about a year since I released my first round of Control-IQ videos, which seems crazy that it's been like a year and a half since we have this system. But I wanted to go through some of the optimization pieces again, as well as adding some more that I have found using the TConnect app that are really, really helpful, that have really kind of let me take my management of Control-IQ to the next level and get even better results. We're going to go over profile hopping, how we can use the profiles in our programming, as well as, like I said, that app and how we can really maximize that. We've also got some videos. We've got a video I just made on Control-IQ and using the X2 basics. So if you're new to the pump as a whole or the system, you can check that one out. Also did one on exercise, a big topic with hybrid closed loops and especially Control-IQ. And those, we'll put links to those kind of in the post or the comments or the description, depending on what format you're and what platform you're watching this. And we'll probably also link to some of the old stuff, our articles, as well as our website and how to get in contact with us. This is kind of an IDS approved video, not necessarily Tandem or FDA approved. This is kind of real world, what I've found using the system, what I've found works with my clients using the system, but definitely nothing kind of in the Tandem training. We're going a little off-road with this stuff. So with that, I'm going to give you some basic building blocks, but everything with diabetes is individualized. So it takes some analysis of your life and your needs and your workouts and your foods and your metabolics and your patterns and your work, and to really dial it in for you. So what I am sharing today are some really basic bones, not to be taken as prescriptive, not to be taken as a clinician telling you what to do with your insulin. It's important that you work with your clinical team to safely and effectively use your technologies, manage your blood sugars and your insulin needs. That being said, feel free to share these videos. Feel free to share them with your clinical team. This is some out-of-the-box thinking that, again, not something generally taught to the public or even to clinicians. And if you would like us at IDS to be part of your clinical team, give us a shout. We do one-on-one consultations and coaching on how to use your insulin, how to use your pumps, how to maximize everything from workouts to Chinese food. Jumping in, I started a year ago with some of my early findings, some initial things that I found that helped the system work really well. First and foremost is starting with good settings. This system is designed that even if you have kind of decent settings, it's really designed to what it's created for, and what it's amazing for is going to save so many lives. I think these early hybrid closed loop systems is like, if you've got an A1C like over 7.5, no judgment. It's tough. It's tough out there. If you've got, you know, that elevated A1C, or if you've got like 10% or more hypoglycemia, like you don't go to the bathroom without glucose tabs, it's going to fix a lot of that. It's going to just knock that kind of into shape, which is awesome. That's life-saving and life-changing for a lot of people. From there, it gets a little rough, especially if you've been sold by your clinician. They're like, oh, you're never going to have to worry about basal testing ever again. It's going to do it all for you. Or, oh, it's amazing. It's going to bring your A1C down and give you better targets. Like if your A1C was 6.6 to begin with, you don't have a whole lot of improvement room in terms of your average. What you might have improvement room is your standard deviation, how smooth things are, how stable things are. You might have room to go, and you might be micromanaging your brains out to get there. Or you might be able to improve your time in range. Maybe you've always struggled with you know, those metabolic things that come in life, and spotting them and acting on them with confidence. That's what this system's good for. But we really want to optimize it, because I would say it's manual pumping. It's like we were driving dump trucks on a Formula One race course, you know, trying to keep up. And you were white knuckle driving. You had to drive the wheels off that thing to get a decent A1C out of it, to get a decent standard deviation, to not go low, to be able to exercise and live life on your terms. It's like somebody took our dump truck and swapped it out for like a Honda Civic. Definitely more maneuverable, has some cool automated features like, hey, it's got parking assist and it lets me know when I'm too close to another car. Sweet. It's got but it is still a Honda Civic. It is not a Formula One race car. And so we still have to really learn how to drive this thing, and drive it pretty aggressively if we want to really kind of try to win this race. So that's what today's stuff is about, is kind of showing you some of that Formula One level racing. The first one is, like I said, basal settings, getting your settings really dialed in. Basal testing, even though this system is adjusting my basal, it adjusts it based off the basal I have programmed. And so starting with accurate basal programming is really important, because if what I have programmed in there is too high, I'm still going to go low, because the system can only do so much. And if my system is, or if my program basal is too low, I'm still going to sit high, because the system can only go so far. So starting with good, strong program settings is important. Starting with good, strong carb ratios, good, strong correction factors, that's all going to make this system work that much better. In terms of what of those am I probably going to need or want to adjust to make Control-IQ work better? Different story. And I do also recommend take the time to get those manual settings really dialed in, because life happens. You might have a delivery of Dexcoms that don't show up. Your insurance company might completely sandbag on you and delay prior authorizations for weeks. And so you're now in manual mode. You're old school 90s style finger sticking until those Dexcoms come back. When you do that, you want to make sure that you've got a setting set that's going to work for that manual time. And then you can have additional profiles specially dialed in to make Control-IQ perform really well. The first setting that I found needed a little tweak were my correction factors. The Control-IQ setup hardwires in a 5-hour duration of insulin action time. It's one of those safety rails that they had to put in the system, and that all hybrid closed loop systems have to put in a certain number of safety rails to get through the FDA, quite frankly. And so one that Tandem uses is a duration of insulin action of 5 hours. So the closer your starting duration of insulin action in manual mode is to that 5 hours, the less you're going to see any need to change any of your settings. But the farther you start from that, the less effective your pump's going to be. For example, my duration of insulin action in manual mode is at 3¼ hours. It's pretty aggressive and it's pretty quick. That is a massive leap in terms of how big my correction is at the 2, 3, and obviously at the 4 to 5 hour mark. I'm going to get way less correction insulin from Control-IQ than I am manually with that faster insulin action time. So I had to get a bit more aggressive with my correction factors. I think mine came out somewhere around 10 to 15% more aggressive with Control-IQ than in manual mode. Again, individual results are gonna vary. I recommend try the system for a few days. If your blood sugars are just hanging at like 200, regardless of how many corrections or how much basal turn up this system's doing, make sure it's not your infusion set, make sure it's not a metabolic thing going on, because flukes love to happen when we start a new system. But beyond that, you might need to have some calibrations done to those correction factors. The other one was carb ratio. I found, and in general with hybrid closed loop systems, they work really well if we get a little, just slightly heavier on the coverage of carbs up front and let the system reduce just a little bit on the backside. It's a little bit of a perk that helps us keep that initial postprandial rise down a little bit. Now with this, you then have to be very mindful of those foods that are going to be slower digesting. If we put more insulin on the front end, we're just making those slow digesting foods more problematic. We're increasing that risk of hypoglycemia in an initial drop and things like that. So definitely keep that in mind. But I found that was another sort of optimization place. I could get a little bit more aggressive with my carb coverage because I knew the system had my back on the other side. So once I've got a good starter profile for Control IQ, then I found, well, there are times when the system is just limited in how aggressive it's going to be, and how effective it is. And there are some times when I know I metabolically am going to need more or less insulin. And Control IQ is always being reactive. It's always waiting to see the high in progress before it does something about it. It's waiting to see the drop in progress before it does something about it. But I can be proactive. I can tell the system, hey, I'm going to need more insulin. Hey, I'm going to need less insulin. And it's really effective. What I do is what I call profile hopping. I take that central Control IQ profile, I duplicate it, and I have one with the basals set higher and one with the basals set lower. So that higher basal set, I'm now jumping off from a higher basal to deal with those times when I'm going to be more sedentary, eating high-fat meals, really stressed out, didn't sleep well, hormones, growth spurts for little kids, all of that kind of stuff. And then the lower profile, I can swap to that for more active time. If I'm going to be drinking alcohol, again, hormone shifts, either high or low for things like altitude changes and changes in climate that can really be kind of a wild card. Like, I don't know which way it's going to push. I just know it's going to push. And so I can use those in place of things that are sort of temp basal places that I had been doing before. For me, I found like a 50% increase works really well. 30% decrease works really well. But again, individual results are going to vary. So you're going to need to tailor into your metabolic needs and your situations. The other place of optimization that I found super helpful this year was with the release of the TConnect app. If you are using an X2 pump and you have a smartphone, you need this app. It is amazing. And if you're just starting Control IQ, get this app. It saves your mental health. When I first started Control IQ, it was really frustrating because I was going, what is the system doing? Why isn't it doing things? I've been high for 2 hours and it's not doing anything. And so I would tap that status icon. If you haven't found it, your insulin indicator that shows how much insulin you have in your pump, tap that. It's a button. It brings up your current status. It'll show the current basal running in that 5-minute period. So not super educational. It'll also tell you your last bolus. So you can see like, oh, okay, Control IQ did auto bolus me. It is doing something, maybe just not what I'm used to seeing it do. And so I'm going to do a screen share and show you some ways that I use this app that I really, really like to use. So this is a screen share of the app. I didn't use my app because I can never, it's hard to predict what data I'm going to have showing on my app. When you bring the app up, it's going to look like this image over here. It's going to show your CGM graph. It's going to show any manual blood sugars that you put in. It's going to show any boluses in light blue. Auto boluses, it'll show with little navy blue drops. It shows basal. So this kind of big block section, that indicates programmed basal. These little skinny sections indicate where Control IQ has been raising or lowering basal. The red sections are where it's suspended entirely or where you suspended your pump. And then if you scroll down or swipe up, depending on your perspective, then you get this status bar. It's going to show the basal rate, your last bolus time. It's going to show what basal profile you're running, all of the calibrations or all of the ratios for that, your last calibration, your time your sensor started. That could be really handy. Like, do I need to change my Dexcom today, tomorrow, 3 days from now? It's right there. And so I found this super useful. First, like I said, when I started Control IQ, it was super frustrating not being able to actually see what it was doing. Now I can actually see like exactly what this system is doing. And that's a good peace of mind helper while I'm transitioning into this system to let me know, hey, like, it's working on it. Give it time. Remember, your insulin is going to take an hour to do much of anything, a couple of hours to really start bringing down a high blood sugar. It's going to take like 3 hours to really do everything it's going to do. Give it time. Give the system time. And then it was also really nice to see, like before I would go into a workout, I can now look, like if I'm going to work out right here, it's really nice to be able to see, like if I'm going to work out right here, like 6:30 a.m. It's really nice to see like, oh my gosh, or if I'm at 6 a.m., maybe right before breakfast. Oh, you know, look at that. The system, my blood sugar maybe wasn't even rising. Maybe I'm holding flat, but the system has been cranking up my basal to keep me there. Oh, okay. That's important to know. Maybe I'm going to take that into consideration. Maybe I'm going to eat a little bit of carb to balance out that extra insulin. Maybe I'm going to change up my workout a little bit. Maybe I'm going to go for a weightlifting day instead of a jogging day or something like that so that I don't have that low. And so check out the exercise piece on that. Or on the other side, where I found it even more useful was, and this is how I found my exercise strategies with Control IQ, by the way, was by looking at these and seeing what was it doing before my workout, what was it doing during my workout, and using that to adjust my strategies for how I was going to use the system, which was super nice, instead of just kind of having to infer what it was doing before we had the app. Or if I'm over here, say I'm going to eat right here at like, maybe I'm going to eat it at 9:15, it looks like right about here. Well, my carb ratios work really well, but they're predicated on a full basal complement. If my full basal is being delivered, my carb ratio gets me from A to B really nicely. Basal insulin acts like gravity. So if I've got full earth gravity and I jump, I'm going to have a predictable trajectory and landing. If I'm jumping on the moon, somebody suddenly took all my gravity away and I jump, I'm going to go a lot higher and I'm going to hang there a lot longer. And I may never even come back down to the ground. I'm going to need some gravity, going to need some assistance. So I can look at this and say, well, if I'm going to eat, wow, look at this. I was coming down. So I know the system was probably reducing my basal because that's what it's supposed to do. And I said, wow, look at that. It took away probably, I mean, this from this light line to this light line is an hour. Well, more than half of that is missing. So, because this is my program from 1 across to 1, and look at that big gap. There's like half an hour worth of basal missing there. So I can say, well, my program basal is a 1. I can pretty safely add to this bolus that half hour of insulin that I missed. I can add a 0.5 onto my total. So I put in my blood sugar, put in my carbs, get my recommended dose. I can tap that and I can pretty safely add a 0.5 to that to make up for the basal that I missed. If my blood sugar is not dropping too far, I can also give it a little extra pre-bolus time because I know I'm going to lift up a lot higher than usual, so I can let my insulin get acting a little bit more before that happens. In this particular case, at that time of day, I was coming down close to a 70. I don't know how much extra pre-bolus I want to head on or add on to that, but it's an option, and it's really good to know we have that option. It helps with one of the things that people complain about most with the system is like everything I eat goes above 200. Well, that's probably because every time you eat, you have a downward blood sugar trend coming into that meal. When would I not want to add on that extra insulin? Well, if I've been really active, so I'm going to be extra insulin sensitive. Well, now the system is pulling down, not so much just because of my blood sugar action, but the exercise. So I don't want to throw extra insulin on top of a really sensitive time, or if I'm going to be active after this, obviously I don't want to throw extra insulin in that. So again, not blanket statements here, just some optimization pieces to think about. The other piece that is really helpful with the app is, again, being able to see what the system's doing and breathing. These system hybrid closed loops as a whole work best when we let them do what they do. The more we get in there and mess around, throw insulin around, the more the systems become kind of unstable. Then it's kind of what we think we should do versus what the system thinks we should do. We're working against each other, and really both of us are counteracting each other, and so we never really make progress. We're frustrated and the system's useless. The best way to get tight control with Control IQ is to let the system do its thing and take a little short-term loss for big long-term gains. What I mean here is that very many of us bolus like fighter pilots, right? Fighter jet pilots on aircraft carriers come in hot. They come just screaming out of the sky, and they just park it on the tarmac because they don't have a lot of runway to deal with, and they park it, and then they catch a cable and it snaps. If you've ever watched Top Gun, you can see I clearly watched it way too many times. But so they come in hot and fast, and they stop on a dime, and we go, yes, look at that. I came down from a 180, and I just, in an hour, I slammed down and I parked it at a 92. Yeah. That doesn't work well with Control IQ, because with Control IQ, I come down from a 180, I slam some extra insulin at it, I throttle down at that fighter carrier or deck, and I come down and I hit my 92, and then the system freaks out because it thinks I'm going low. So it pulls back all my basal, and instead of parking, I come down and the aircraft carrier isn't there anymore. So what do I have to do? I have to then throttle up back into the sky. And that's what our blood sugar does. We come down and we bounce, and then we sit at 140. And we're so frustrated, especially those overnights. Like dinner comes down too hot and fast, we bounce up and we sit at 140 all night. And the system's fine letting us sit at 140 because it's not going to engage to change it unless we look like we're going above 140. And if I'm sitting at 137 all night, I don't ever get that extra help to get back down. So take the short-term loss. Let it take a little longer to come down. Let it be a little gentler. Let it be a little more graceful. The system doesn't want to work with fighter pilots. It's scared of that because it's designed to prevent plane crashes. But if you come in like a ninja, if you come in like a spy, if you come in like a drone, drones don't come in hot and fast and park on aircraft carriers. Drones slowly drift down out of the sky. If you do that, that's how you can get this system to let you drift down, down, down. And if you slowly drift down, you can come in at an 87. You can come in at a 92, and you can sleep there all night because the system doesn't freak out and start reducing your insulin unless it looks like you're going to drop below that. So if we come in nice and slow and easy so that we're not throwing off all these Dexcom trend alert things in the system, we can come in low, we can come in slow. Now, when I did this, I looked at my data. I looked at it when I was running kind of my way and knocking things down fast. And then I looked at it over here when I let the system do its thing low and slow. And I thought, I'm staying higher for longer. Therefore, my average will go up. My average came down about 20 points. Yes, I was going a little longer in an elevated state, but I was then going significantly longer at a lower state. And I didn't, I'm not sitting at 200. I was still in range. My time in range didn't change. In fact, it actually went up probably a little bit because I didn't have any scraper lows. And at the same time, I was working my food bolus timing. I was saying, well, if I don't want it to go so high and take so long to stay up, let me pay a little more attention to my pre-bolus time. Let me pay a little bit more attention to my extended bolus time. Let me do a little optimization with my profile hopping for high-fat foods and things like that. I increased my time in range and my average came down because I took the short-term loss for a really big long-term gain. So those are my recommendations for optimization. Throw me yours. I love to learn. We're really learning from each other because our Our doctors don't know how to use the system. They haven't had it and they don't get trained on it. The pump company can't tell us this stuff because they're not allowed to tell us any use other than what the FDA approved. So we're learning from each other on these systems. We have Horizon system coming out in a couple of months. Check us out on IDS. We'll be letting you guys know about that. Check out our other videos, exercise, basics, other Control IQ stuff, IDS general. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great day.